Hello everyone. Today's topic is about anatomy and physiology review of respiratory system. This is for medical surgical nursing. This is a short review about both anatomy and physiology of respiratory system so that we can understand the disease process better. These are the organs of the respiratory system starting from nasal cavity. Then we have pharynx. Pharynx has three parts: oropharynx, nasopharynx, and laryngopharynx. Continuing to larynx. After that, we have trachea and then bronchus. Trachea leads to bronchus, which leads to alveoli and lungs. After lungs, there is diaphragm, which is one of the chief respiratory muscles. Next chief respiratory muscle is the intercostal muscles between these ribs. These are the respiratory organs, which is listed here. Lungs are covered by a structure called as a respiratory membrane or pleura. The pleura contains two specific layers, visceral layer and parietal layer. Parietal layer is the outer layer, whereas visceral layer is the internal layer. In between those two layers, there is presence of fluid called as pleural fluid, which helps to prevent friction. Lungs is in continuous movement during the respiration. So, because of that movement, friction can occur. Pleural fluid helps to control that friction. Along with that, we have mechanism of breathing, respiratory volumes, capacity, respiratory sound, external respiration, gas transport, also control of respiration. Talking about nasal cavity, the opening of nasal cavity is nostrils. There are two nostrils, which are divided by a midline nasal septum. There are olfactory receptors, which are the receptors for the sense of smell. Also, there are respiratory mucosa, which makes the air moistened and purifies the air as it goes inside. We have a mucus. These sticky mucus are produced by the glands, which traps the incoming bacteria, debris, and also moistens the air. We have cilia or ciliated cells that helps in movement of the air as it goes inside. Also, we have conchae, which are the lateral walls of nasal cavity, which increases the surface area of the mucosa exposed to the air and air turbulence in the nasal cavity. There are palates. Nasal cavity is separated from the oral cavity below by a partition, the palate. There are hard palate and soft palate. Near to nose, there are sinuses. We have paranasal sinuses. These sinuses are in frontal, sphenoid, ethmoid, and maxillary side. These lighten the skull and act as a resonance chamber for speech. Moving ahead, there is the anatomy of nose. After that, we have pharynx. There are information about size of the pharynx, length, function. Its function is it is a passageway for both air and food, as we have oropharynx, nasopharynx. Also, we have information about portions of the pharynx and tube. The tube, which is located at the middle side, pharyngotympanic tube or eustachian tube, which is connected to the middle ear. So, whatever is there at the middle ear might travel down to the airway, to the eustachian tube or pharyngotympanic tube. Also, there is pharyngeal tonsil, which is often called as adenoid, which is located at the eye region of nasopharynx. They are palatine and lingual tonsils. After that, we come to larynx. Larynx is also called as voice box that routes or directs the air and food into the proper channels and plays a role in speech. Structurally, larynx is located inferior to the pharynx. It is formed by 8 hyaline cartilages. Thyroid, one of the cartilage is thyroid cartilage. We actually have 4 cartilage that surrounds and 8 along with them other 4 cartilage, total 8 that is located downwards and upwards. The name of 4 cartilages are important. They are TACE, thyroid cartilage, arytenoid cartilage, cricoid cartilage, and epiglottis. Epiglottis is also called as guardian of airways because it protects the opening of the larynx. Whatever solid particle, food particle tries to enter the airway, epiglottis protects us from those particles. After that, we have vocal folds or vocal cords, which vibrates with expelled air and allows us to speak. Also, there is glottis. Glottis is a passageway, is a gallery between the vocal folds. After that, we come to a bony structure called as trachea. Now, trachea is called as a windpipe. Its location is at the level of fifth thoracic vertebra, which is approximately mid-chest. Structure. Trachea is fairly rigid because there are hyaline cartilages which are C-shaped all around. And trachea also helps to moisten and filter the air as it comes down. There are cilia, which is a soft kind of structure. Anything that tries to enter along with the airway from upper to lower, cilia protects us from that particle. And the particle which is trapped comes out of the airway through mechanism of coughing or mechanism of sneezing. This is the anatomy of trachea. We find trachea after larynx anatomically, which leads to bronchi. Now, bronchi is the entrance to lungs. Bronchi are located at both right and left side. Right bronchus is wider, shorter, and also straighter than the left. They are located at the mediastinum, central part. Apex, the apex is narrow and superior portion of each lungs, because bronchi leads us to alveoli and lungs. It is deep to the clavicle. Base is resting on the diaphragm. And division. Division is the lobes. Left lung has 2 lobes, right lung has 3 lobes. I talked about pleura earlier. There are visceral pleura, parietal pleura, which has pleural fluid that prevents friction. Bronchioles, they are the branches of the bronchus that leads us to alveoli. Now, alveoli is the main structure where oxygen and carbon dioxide exchange takes place. Alveoli are also known as air sacs. The lungs is completely filled with fluid during fetal life. During pregnancy, the fetus lungs is completely filled with fluid which has high resistance. As soon as baby comes out of the womb to the delivery, normal delivery or cesarean section, then baby starts to breathe, respire, the fluid is absorbed inside and air starts to get filled as the baby breathes. There is respiratory zone. They are alveolar ducts, alveolar sac, alveoli. Also conducting zone structures. The respiratory passages are conducting zone structures that serves as conduits to and from the respiratory zone. Also there are wall structures, alveolar pores connect them to the blood vessel. Also respiratory membrane. Respiratory membrane is all about movement of air, movement of muscles against each other. Respiratory membrane has main function in the movement. Talking about immunity, alveolar macrophages, they protect the airway from different kind of foreign body and pathogen. Also there are cuboidal cells. They are scattered form of epithelial cells which produce surfactant. The surfactant are very, very important in the involuntary movement of lungs during gas exchange. Physiology of respiration, we have pulmonary ventilation, external respiration, gas transport, and then internal respiration. All these are different to each other but works as a cycle. As the air enters, it goes inside, gets exchanged, come outside. This process occurs from the movement of by the movement of muscles, and then the oxygen carbon dioxide exchange continues. Composition of air. The inspired air contains 21% of oxygen, 16% of oxygen is found in expired air. Carbon dioxide 0.04% in inspired air and 4% in expired air. Nitrogen is 79%. This is the most abundant gas in the atmosphere. About respiratory volume, we have TVRT, total lung volume, vital capacity, residual volume, and tidal volume. Total volume is the amount of air that a lung can hold at a maximum, that is 5,800 ml. Vital capacity is total amount of air that lung can expire at a maximum, 4,600 ml. Residual volume is difference or subtraction of total lung volume and vital capacity, that is 1200 ml. Amount of air that lungs can hold and amount of air that lungs can expire. We come to tidal volume after that. That is amount of air that is held by the airway in a normal respiration, that is held normally during a respiration is 500 ml. After that we have pressure. Pressure explanation during inspiration and expiration. What happens to the air as we inspire and we expire? What happens to each muscle of the airway as we inspire and expire? When does the contraction occur? After that, when does the relaxation occur? For how long that contraction lasts and how long does the relaxation last? There is intrapulmonary volume, pleural pressure, and non-respiratory movements. Volume, intrapulmonary volume can be volume within the lungs, and interpleural pressure is pressure which is within the pleural space. Non-respiratory air movement can be movements such as cough, sneeze, laughing, hiccups, and yawning. Respiratory sounds that we hear during a physical examination. First kind of sound can be bronchial sound, found at trachea and bronchi. Vesicular breathing sound, found at the alveoli, that means at the whole surface of the lungs. These are some other breath sounds, its character, and clinical correlation, that means which kind of sound is found in which disease condition. After that, we have internal external respiration and gaseous transport. Talking about external respiration, it is the respiration in which there is gas exchange between the oxygen loaded and carbon dioxide unloaded. In internal respiration, there is gas exchange in which oxygen is loaded into the blood and carbon dioxide is removed. Gaseous transport. Gaseous transport is about transport of particles of the blood. When is carbon dioxide transported, when is oxygen transported, hemoglobin transported, RBC, WBC, these are transported. So these are gaseous transport. Because oxygen, carbon dioxide, hemoglobin, they all are related to each other. They move in the blood within the same volume, within the same space. So their dissolving, their measurement in plasma is done together. Gaseous transport helps us to measure that. Control of respiration. Control of respiration is done by neural regulation. First of all, we have phrenic and intercostal nerves that controls the diaphragm and external intercostal muscles. Then we have control from medulla and pons that controls respiratory rhythm and depth. What we find during ausculting, respiratory rhythm and depth are controlled by medulla and pons. There is an information on eupnea. Normal respiratory rate is called as eupnea, which is maintained normally. If we combine the normal respiratory rate of every age, we can find 12 to 15 per minute. Or if we talk only about adults, it can go to 20. Hyperapnea, where there is excess breathing, this can occur during exercise or during disease condition. And there are non-neural factors, like physical factors. While talking, coughing, exercising, breathing rate changes, as well as there is increase in some other things like body temperature, like body blood pressure, which might change the respiratory rate. There is volition, that is conscious control. Consciously, when we are trying to control, then our blood pH might be changing. That is non-neural control of respiration. Also, emotional factors. When we face various kind of emotion, then our respiratory rate changes. This is all about that. Chemical factors. These chemicals are chemicals found inside the body. Oxygen, carbon dioxide, nutrients, electrolytes. These all chemicals, when they are disturbed in amount, respiratory rate changes. Hyperventilation, when there is excess carbon dioxide releasing out of the body and body contains too much of oxygen only. Hypoventilation, when there is lack of carbon dioxide releasing out of the body and body contains too much carbon dioxide. Hypoventilation. Thank you so much. Disease conditions are discussed in next videos.